Alright, so here is the meat of the games. These 5 circle games and a couple variations of them are going to set up enough content that you could easily play a game every day of class for 10 or 20 minutes, because just like anything else in adventure education, this is something that's a genuine challenge, and it is difficult. It can take a bit of work, but it's also not beyond the reach of almost anybody. We recently, just this last summer, I played with a student who broke his arm partway through summer school, and so any game that required 2 objects being held at the same time, of course, he was down to 1, and all of the other students worked with him. He was even one of the students, he stands out in my mind, because almost every day he would say, "Man, I'm not playing this game. This is a dumb game. I'm not going to play with you." And yet every day I would say, "Okay, you don't have to play. Just come up here with us. Everybody else is out here. Why don't you come up with all your classmates?" And then the other classmates would be the one to call him into the circle. And he didn't want to say no to anybody else. He was just fighting me as an authority figure. And then by the end of the few weeks of summer school, he'd say no, and I'd just say, "Look, every day you do this, it's never been a real fight. Why don't you come out here and play?" And he'd go, "Oh, fine," and he'd come out and play with us. And I got to the point where he would ask whether we were playing or not, which is pretty common. It's a pattern I see a lot. So we will go in a little more detail how to teach some tips about giving out the rules, how to do this with your students, but I guarantee you, again, I've taught elementary school up to rocket scientists coming in on the weekends for a completely different course, and I have taught for many years at an at-risk high school filled entirely with some of the troubled youth, that get kicked out of a lot of other schools, and using these games in order to reintegrate them, to re-engage them in that dropout position that I had, all right? So we're going to start with the very basic one. It's called Name, Yes, Throw, okay? And it's pretty much in it. You're going to get your entire class in a circle. I've played around tables before or with objects in the center, but it's a much better feeling if you can find a spot in the center of your classroom or out in the gym or out in a hallway or just right outside your classroom if it's at all possible, all right? It's going to depend a little bit on the size of your class, or you can do it with subgroups. If you have one group working on one side of the room, you can pull out half the class at a time to play on the other side, right? So first off, name, yes, throw. It's that simple. You have everybody in a name. Let's say there's somebody named Sarah across the circle from me. I say Sarah, she says yes, and then I can throw the object to her. In terms of logistics, I always played with, the last couple of years we had this set of foam bowling pins from an indoor bowling game. They were great because they flew through the air really strangely, and it gave another level of physical skill. I've also played with little sets of foam dodgeballs. I've played with tennis balls, and I've played with random objects as well. So sometimes like a rope and a basketball and a 10-pound medicine ball, depending on the distance you're throwing it, and a tennis ball. And the fact that they're different objects really can change it up as well, all right? But the basic idea is name, yes, throw, and we'll go over how strict you need to be with the rules, but the whole point of the game is to give a set of rules and to help people follow them, right? It's not just to play catch. So you hear, you say a name, they say yes, you throw the ball. They say a name, everyone hears a yes, they throw the ball, all right? And you keep moving it around. This is a really easy one, and this is also where I always stress to my students especially, hey, this is the right time. If you don't know a name, the right protocol is to say, hey, what's your name? And ask the other person. All the time, students would look at me, like right next to them and be like, hey, what's that person's name? And of course, the other student is always 10 feet or 15 feet across the circle from them. It's sort of this weird social, like, they're right there, why don't you talk to them? So that's really what I helped drive home. I had a big focus on kind of basic social skills with my 14 to 21-year-old high schoolers, as well as getting people working as a group, right? So that's the first one, is just name, yes, throw, and a couple variations. You can play with multiple objects. So once you get one object moving around and everybody's really good at following those basic sets of rules, you can start to add more and more in. I've played it, I think we'd have groups of about 10 at summer school, and we'd get 7 or 8 objects out. So where people are almost like fighting to get that open spot, right? Very, very experiment and see what works for you. You can also, you have multiple options, and you can also try to play the game silently. This is a great way to build nonverbal communication skills. It also makes people pay attention to each other more closely because they're no longer just listening for their name, but you have to like stare at them and make it really clear, like, hey, you trying to get it to them, and then you'll still hear a yes, and then they throw it, right? So you can play completely silent, you can play it where just the person throwing is silent. There's a ton of variations that you can play with each one of these games, all right? So the 2 branches, we're going to start down this side. This is definitely the most common side that I use, but these are options as well, especially if you have a bigger class or you have a little more space like a gym. These are great options as well, but they're a little more time intensive, all right? So this main branch here, if you've got name, yes, throw down, and you've got it with multiple objects, and you've got it silently, and then you can even do it silently with multiple objects, right? If you're getting this and you seem to have a really good group dynamic going on, I will always switch down to a pattern game. What this is, and it helps if it's a group closer to the 10 to 15 size, but you can do it with much bigger groups, is each person remembers who they throw to. Now, if it's a giant group and it's going to take a while, I suggest remembering by just having them point at that person's feet. It kind of takes out the rudeness of pointing right at them, but point at that person's feet and leave their arms up the whole time so that they know who they threw to, right? You start off with the pattern, you throw the ball to that person, you remember who you threw it to. A couple of basic rules in that. You do want to let everybody get it once and only once before it comes back to you, and you're trying to throw across the circle as much as possible, not directly next to you or at a shallow enough angle that you might skim somebody's nose as the object goes past, right? So you are throwing across the circle, and you want to remember who you threw it to. So I'll pass one object around, and I normally get that 3 or 4 times to make sure we have the pattern down, and then you can start to add again multiple. You add multiple items in, just like the first one, but this one you can really get a lot in there because they're flowing continuously through the circle. You can also play it silently. One big focus, if it's not silent, though, is that you're still using a name every time. You no longer need to have them say yes back, though, because that gets a little, it's too much going on at once. But still, you should hear name every time as the object is thrown around. And you can also, the R here is for reverse. What I love to do is I'll get a pattern going, we'll do it, get it so it's a really good rhythm, and everybody's like, man, this is awesome, are we done now? Then I'll take a different colored object and you throw it the reverse pattern. So whoever you've been catching from, you're now throwing to that person, and it goes all the way backwards. I love to combine these two, multiple and reverse. Once you have one going reverse, I'll just start another object going forward. It sounds like a lot, but I've seen student after student adapt to it, especially at the higher levels. So once you have a few objects going forward, you can have 1 or 2 going backwards as well. And when they do meet, you'll see the 2 people have to throw an object at the same time past each other to make it work, all right? It's a little more critical thinking, it's a little more creativity, it's a little more communication and collaboration. Those 4 C's coming back into it, right? So multiple, reverse, and silent. And finally, this one's not really a sustainable game, but if they've been doing really well, I normally use this as a reward. The flaw is that they really want to keep doing it until they all get this, and the benefit is that often they really do get it and they feel great and everybody high fives and they're super excited for the rest of the class, all right? But what this is you make sure you pass out enough objects that everybody in the circle has it, and it's part of the, it's an extension of the pattern game, but once you have a pattern really well down, you get everybody an object and you say 1, 2, 3, throw, and everybody throws at once, and you can get to a point where every single person, especially in a smaller circle of 10, maybe up to 15 people, all of them move at once and everybody catches. And that's the goal, right? And you'll see people, suddenly there's this really big group bonding, everybody wants each other to do well and supports each other, and nobody wants to screw around anymore because you don't want to be the one person that messes it up. So suddenly everybody is throwing at once and catching at once, all right? So that is this branch down here. I would say these 2 games, Name, Yes, Throw, and Pattern, are where I spend a lot of the time, and I see a lot of the benefits, all right? Now, if I'm doing a little bit of a longer, especially an outdoor course or in a gym or have a little more time, then this branch is a great one, all right? So again, Name, Yes, Throw, great place to start, one of the most basic ones. What walking is name, yes, throw, but you take the object away, you become the object. So in that first example, I say Sarah, she says yes, and I throw the object to Sarah. In this case, I say Sarah, and what I'm saying, and I often have students who aren't clear on it the first time, just say the full sentence, but they'll say, Sarah, can I have your spot? She says yes, and then you slowly walk over to take Sarah's spot. Now, before Sarah can move, she has to say to somebody else, hey, Jake, can I have your spot? And start walking over to get to his spot, all right? It's again, you're still learning names, you're still building that community, and now you also have a little more coordination, you have a little more timing incorporated as well. The big trick on this one is not, to keep reminding people not to move their feet until they have heard a yes from somebody. Because the big one is, Sarah will say, Mr. Greaves, can I have your spot? And I'll say, yes, and then I just wander off to go get it. Now, I don't do that as much, thankfully, anymore, but that is a very common mistake with everybody trying it for the first time. Again, from high school to rocket scientists to every age group, you're going to have people say yes to someone and just walk off because they think they're done, right? So they still saying name, yes, but then it's walking over to them, all right? And you can get a really good flow where they're going. The goal is to have another place to go, and everybody has to pay attention, all right? Now, the hardest version, I think, which can also be the most entertaining, and I would play it when students were behaving pretty well, or it was a well-organized classroom, and I loved seeing the kids that come in, and it's an at-risk school. Plenty of them might fall into that hard category of students, a lot of face tattoos. Plenty of them have done some kind of jail time, or mostly juvenile detention time. But the students would come in and they'd make a real big point that they're way too tough for these games, that they're too tough for learning, all that. And then 5 or 6 minutes into the zombie game, I have seen pretty tough-looking students crawling backwards over the desk to get away from one of their friends who's the zombie currently. All right. So here's how this works. I may have to put a little diagram up for it. All right, but basic outline here. We'll do a very simple version, all right? So this is a group of 6 people here. The 6th one, I normally start in the middle as the teacher, but the 6th one here is our zombie, all right? So the teacher in the middle is the zombie. If you tag somebody, they become the zombie. Here's how it works, all right? So the zombie starts to walk towards student A. Student A cannot say anything because you can't suddenly make noise if a zombie is attacking you. That makes the zombie attack you faster, okay? Instead, student A needs to look across the circle for help. So student A might look across to student D for help. All right? And the best part is, because you make it silent, they can't say anything, so they have to look across, and they're just pointing, and they're like, come on, help me, with that look on their face, and they're looking across at student D. Student D also is not attacking the zombie or anything like that, but student D's job now is to help student A. All right? So student D is helping student A by saying another student. All right? So fill in these other ones. Alright, so you've got a zombie in the middle. The zombie walks towards student A. Student A cannot say anything, or the zombie goes faster. Student A has to look over and ask anybody who's looking at them for help. They ask student D for help. Student D will say another name, in this case, student C, and the zombie has to change course and start zombie walking over towards student C. Alright? Now, student C is the one being attacked by the zombie. Again, it's not a violent game. The teacher just gets to walk like a zombie. I love to make little zombie noises because everybody laughs and the students start to get a little bit nervous, which is really funny. But I will zombie walk over towards student C. Student C has to look over to somebody else for help. And very quickly, the cool benefits of this one, everybody gets used to, even though it's simulated danger of a zombie, there's no danger, nobody's actually feeling threatened in any way, but because there's this simulated risk of needing help, this simulated situation, you have students over and over practicing looking to each other for help when there's an important situation going on. So over and over, students are practicing looking for another person, and the best part is A, who's practicing looking for help in one of their classmates, student D is practicing helping their classmate, all right? And very quickly, students learn who they can trust, who will be helping them, who will not be helping them. All of these steps to start making a better and better classroom environment, all right? So this is the zombie game. It's by far the most complicated one. It takes me less time to explain it to a group of students than to just a video, but for each one of these, we are going to be filming a demonstration, most likely with one of my improv comedy teams, because it's much easier to get permission forms from adults than a group of high schoolers for media release. But we're going to be filming it, giving a quick demonstration of each one of these so you can see what it looks like, all right? So next, though, I know right at this point there's probably a few questions going through your head. If it doesn't fit my personality, I'm not used to this. What if I don't have these objects? I don't have a set of dodgeballs. One of the big ones that comes up every time. How is this tied to academic standards, right? How can I tie this into my classroom? Or the kind of common like, great, but I'd never get permission from my principal to go to the gym for half an hour every day and do this. And of course, that's not what we're promoting, right? That 10th generation education mindset, though, says that we want to build a classroom environment where every day we're influencing students enough that for the next 10 generations, we've helped steer them and all their descendants and everybody their descendants come in contact with towards the better, right? And for me, one of the best ways to be able to do that is to build a community of students who is used to teamwork, used to trust, used to collaborating, used to having a strong social network, and having a set of values that go along with that, as well as having all of this tied back to academics, okay? So the next few minutes, I'm going to break down how these games can be tied into the classroom, what that looks like, and give you a bunch of the tips and tricks that I've put together over the last 10 years or so of using these games in a ton of different environments.